In 1776, this country had no navy, no standing army, no money. Its soldiers were starving, barefoot in the snow, freezing to death at Valley Forge, while the most powerful empire on Earth hunted them down. 170 years later, that same country dropped 2 atomic bombs, rebuilt Europe from scratch, and told the Soviet Union, the other superpower on the planet, exactly where the line in the sand was drawn. How does that happen? How does the most fragile, most desperate experiment in democracy become the single most powerful force in the history of human civilization? That's what we're about to find out. Here's something most people don't appreciate about the American Revolution. It wasn't supposed to work. The British Empire at that point controlled roughly a quarter of the entire globe. Their military was elite, experienced, and funded by the wealth of an empire. The colonists? They were farmers, merchants, tradespeople with muskets. And yet, they had something the British didn't account for: desperation. And one other thing, something that would define America for the next 2 centuries: the willingness to play a completely different game. George Washington didn't win by fighting the British head-on. He won by surviving, by retreating, regrouping, and striking only when the odds were in his favor. He understood that the British didn't just need to win, they needed to hold a continent. And holding a continent full of people who didn't want you there, that's a different kind of war entirely. By 1783, Britain walked away, and 13 colonies, broke, divided, and deeply uncertain, were suddenly a country. But here's what nobody tells you. The hardest part wasn't winning the war. It was what came next. The new republic faced an immediate existential question. Do you stay small and safe, or do you grow? They chose to grow, aggressively. In 1803, Napoleon Bonaparte, in the middle of his own wars, cash-strapped and stretched thin, sold the United States over 800,000 square miles of land for approximately 3 cents an acre. 3 cents. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the country overnight, and it set off something almost impossible to contain: a belief, almost a religious conviction, that America was destined to stretch from ocean to ocean. They called it Manifest Destiny. And it drove pioneers, settlers, and frontiersmen westward in one of the largest migrations in human history. It also drove something else: the forced displacement and near destruction of hundreds of native nations, the brutal truth beneath the mythology. But here's what that expansion created economically: resources, land, agriculture, raw material on a scale that no country in Europe could match. America wasn't just growing geographically, it was building capacity. And capacity in the game of power is everything. But before that capacity could be used, the country nearly destroyed itself from within. By 1861, the American experiment was genuinely over, or so it seemed. The country split in 2, brother against brother, the bloodiest war in American history, over 600,000 dead, fought on its own soil, in its own fields, in its own towns. Here's the detail that hits hardest. Some of those battles had more casualties in a single day than entire wars that came before them. And here's the thing about the Civil War that history books often miss: the world was watching. Britain and France were both considering recognizing the Confederacy as a legitimate nation. If they had, America as a unified power would have been finished before it ever really began. It didn't happen, and the Union held, barely. But what emerged from that war was something unexpected: a nation that had been tested at the deepest possible level and survived. And when it came out the other side, the Industrial Revolution was waiting. This is where the story shifts from survival to dominance. In the decades after the Civil War, America industrialized at a speed the world had never seen. Steel production surpassed Britain's by the 1880s. The railroad connected the continent. Goods, people, ideas, all moving faster than ever before. Oil, electricity, the assembly line, one innovation after another, stacking on top of each other like compound interest. By 1900, the United States had the largest economy on Earth. Let that land for a second. A country that didn't exist 125 years earlier, now producing more than Britain, France, and Germany combined. But here's what's fascinating. In 1900, America had almost no global military presence, no empire, no colonies to speak of. It had all this power, and it was still, essentially, invisible on the world stage. That was about to change, violently. World War I is where America first announced itself. Europe had been bleeding for 3 years, millions dead, economies collapsing. And then, in 1917, the United States arrived. Fresh troops, massive industrial output, and a country that hadn't been bombed into rubble. The war ended, and America retreated, back into isolation, back into itself, as if power was something it wasn't quite ready to accept. Then, December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor changed something psychological in America that can't be overstated. The attack didn't just pull America into World War II, it unleashed it. What followed was the most extraordinary industrial mobilization in history. Factories that built cars were building tanks and bombers within months. Women entered the workforce by the millions. The entire economy became a war machine. By the time the war ended in 1945, Europe was shattered. Asia was shattered. The Soviet Union had lost 27 million people. And America? America was the only major power on Earth with its infrastructure completely intact. It held 2/3 of the world's gold reserves. It had the atomic bomb. It had the most powerful Navy and Air Force ever assembled. And it had a decision to make. What do you do with all of that? Here's the move that most people overlook, the one that quietly secured American dominance for the next 80 years. In 1944, before the war even ended, America gathered the world's allied nations in a small town in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods, and they made a deal. The US dollar would become the world's reserve currency. Every country would peg their money to the dollar, and the dollar would be backed by gold. In one meeting, America didn't just win militarily, it restructured the global financial system around itself. Then came the Marshall Plan, America pumping billions into rebuilding Europe. Sounds generous, and it was, but it also meant those rebuilt economies were deeply tied to American trade, American influence, American values. And then, the Cold War. 45 years of psychological warfare, proxy conflicts, arms races, and space races against the Soviet Union. Two superpowers circling each other, each holding enough nuclear weapons to end civilization. The tension peaked in October 1962. 13 days. Kennedy and Khrushchev, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the closest humanity has ever come to nuclear war. It ended, and in 1991, so did the Soviet Union. Suddenly, for the first time in history, there was only one superpower left. From barefoot soldiers freezing in Valley Forge to the architect of the entire global order. That's the arc. That's what happened. But here's the question I'll leave you with, because this is where it gets genuinely uncertain. The systems America built, the dollar, NATO, global trade networks, they're still standing, but they're being tested in ways they haven't been in decades. China is rising. The dollar's dominance is being quietly challenged. Wars in Europe, fractures within. And history, if it teaches us anything, is that no empire lasts forever. Not Rome, not Britain, not anyone. So the real question isn't how America became a superpower. The real question is, what comes next? Is this still the American century? Or are we standing at the end of one era and the very beginning of something none of us can yet name?